Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad to see you all here. This is a good showing here. We have people in here and we have people online, and I'm hoping more people are getting online. This is a nice night, and here's some more people coming in. That's okay. Everybody here is welcome. I'm Michael Schachter. I'm the president of the Carolina Nature Coalition, and as you probably know, probably heard, today is Giving Tuesday. And so, if you like what we do, you can donate in person, if you're here, or you can donate online at our website. We have a donate button. So, and that's how we survive. Only by donations. We don't get any money except from the people who like what we're doing. So if you like, donate. I would like to thank Public Radio East, who had it on their calendar. Of course, I'd like to thank the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of New Bern for providing this beautiful venue, and to Stephanie, who always provides technical help, and definitely to Tom Shoup, who is our CNC secretary, but also our technical guru. He is back there. I'm so glad that Carol is here and healthy. Unfortunately, our communications director, Connie Casey, is under the weather and could not make it here today, but she is on Zoom. And she actually helped plan the Riverbend Organic Community Garden. And so she was really interested in this, so I'm glad that we have it on Zoom also. So, without further ado, I give you our presenter, and I'll say something. Carol Peoples. Carol Peoples is a leader in the Central Coastal Plain chapter of North Carolina Native Plant Society. She is a master gardener in Carteret County and has completed numerous online courses, including those focusing on natural garden design and creating eco-friendly habitat at home. She is currently working towards obtaining the certificate in native plants through the North Carolina Botanical Garden in Chapel Hill. By the way, it's a very nice, if you have never visited it, it is very nice. I visited by chance. I was picking up somebody from the airport, and I had to wait, so I visited the garden. Carol also serves with the Coastal Landscapes Initiative, a public-private collaborative led by the North Carolina Sea Grant, whose aim is to increase the use of native plants in community and individual properties through public outreach and education. So I give you Carol Peoples.
I am delighted to be here and so sorry that I had to cancel last month. I hardly ever get sick, but I was quite ill for a whole week. So thank you for having me back and rescheduling this so quickly. I don't want to waste any time because I have a lot of things to talk about, and I really want you to have a good time. So I hope that you'll enjoy a lot of what we discussed today. But we're going to start with a pop quiz. Okay. It's not that hard. Let's see here. I'm not seeing my screen. Oh, there we go. Who can tell me what kind of butterfly this is? Raise your hand. Yell it out. Monarch. Okay, that's right. It's a monarch. Show of hands, who can tell me if this is a male or a female monarch? Okay, we have a couple people. Do you want to tell me? Can you tell me why? Exactly. These little spots here, for those of us, you see here these little dots? That tells us this is a male. And then the females have heavier veining. So this is from my yard, a male monarch on the asters in the fall. And they're absolutely exquisite. So that's just a little quiz and everybody gets a pass. So we're here to discuss how we can use native plants to make our yards a paradise for birds, bees, and butterflies, and we are definitely going to do that. But before we get to that, it's important to understand what makes a plant native, why they're important, and to learn about the relationship between native plants, insects, and birds. And then it will be a lot more meaningful for you all when we get to the point where we can discuss the things that we can all do in our yards to support biodiversity and protect our local ecosystems. So let's get started. What is a native plant? A lot of people define native plants, native to North America, as plants that were here before the settlers arrived from Europe. I don't like that definition because it discounts the impacts of indigenous peoples that were here, and it's not thorough enough. This is the definition I like. It's important to consider location, the amount of time, which is thousands of years. But the most important part of this definition is that the time has been sufficient for the native plants to develop complex and essential relationships with the physical environment and other organisms in a given ecological community. So it's not just about place and time, it's about these relationships that develop over thousands and thousands of years. So that is the definition that I like. And anytime we talk about a plant being native, we need to reference a location or ecoregion. And here in New Bern, you're in the Mid-Atlantic coastal plain or the coastal plain of North Carolina. But we can drill down a little bit deeper to the EPA's Level 4 ecoregion map. And you can see the little bear there. That is the New Bern area. And if we look at this level of the ecoregion map, most of New Bern is in the Carolina Flatwoods and Mid-Atlantic floodplains and low terraces. So you can see we have a lot of diversity in our ecoregions in our area. Since we've talked about what native plants are, I think it's also important to define what non-native plants are and what non-native invasive plants are. So let's start with the non-native plants. Non-native plants have been either purposely or accidentally moved from their original ecosystem to a new ecosystem. And this is done by humans, and a lot of times it's done for ornamental value. Non-native plants are most of the ones you find in regular plant nurseries and in big box stores. They're generally neutral to the ecosystem, but they provide much less support for wildlife than our native plants do. And they can be problematic if they require a lot of input to remain healthy. If you have to do a lot of watering, fertilizing, pesticides and herbicide use to support them. These are some of the non-native plants that are very common in our area. And I'm sure you would agree that you've seen most of these. And what I find fascinating is that some of the names are really misleading. American boxwood is not from North America. And our turf grasses that are very common here, none of them are from the continent, including Kentucky bluegrass. So it's sort of misleading the way things are named. So we've talked about non-native plants. Let's look at the definition for non-native invasive plants. Now, not all non-native plants become invasive. We use the term invasive specifically for non-native plants that have spread aggressively and are harming the ecosystem. In general, these non-native plants that become invasive share characteristics of being vigorous and aggressive growers. They sprout readily when cut. They produce a lot of seeds. Oftentimes the seeds are very, very appealing to wildlife, so they get spread everywhere. And most importantly, we talked about the relationships that native plants have with other organisms in their ecosystem. Because these plants are not native, they don't have any natural enemies that help keep their growth and spread in check. And because of those characteristics, they outcompete and displace native plant species, and this results in a loss of native plant communities, and then the wildlife that depends on those communities disappears. So these are some of the non-native invasive plants that are from the North Carolina Native Plant Society severe threat list. I have all of these in my neighborhood, and I have at least 1, 2, 3 of those on my property. So I'm sure that you may have some of these on your property as well. These are some of the bad guys. These are ones that we would not recommend anyone buying, and we would hope that you would try to get rid of any that you have. Unfortunately, all of these are still for sale in our nurseries and our big box stores. There are some states that have made moves towards banning the sale of some of these bad guys. I'd love to see North Carolina get there eventually. Several of our counties do now do a bounty program for Bradford pears, where you take a picture of a Bradford pear that you've taken out and they give you a free native tree. But unfortunately, a lot of these are still used, not only bought by homeowners, but used in the landscaping industry. So that's unfortunate. So we've talked about non-native plants as being neutral, non-native invasives as being harmful, and so native plants are good, right? But why are they good? What is the benefit of our native plants? Well, first and foremost, I think they're gorgeous. This is a red ring milkweed. It's native to our area. I'm going to go through a few of the plants that are specifically native to your area, and I'm sure you'll recognize a good number of them. This is the sassafras with the 3 different shaped leaves and beautiful fall color. Yopon holly, this is from my yard. The females bear the berries, and they're just exquisite right now, and the birds make the birds very happy. This is the black cherry. It has early blooms which support our pollinators, which are out early in the year looking for nectar and pollen sources. The American beautyberry, to me, is a showstopper. Those magenta berries are just wonderful. And I like to just put in a little warning right now. When you go to regular plant nurseries and ask for beautyberry, you most likely will be sold one of the Asian beautyberries. So it's important to look for botanical names, Calocarpa americana, so you get the right one. So just a little word of warning, it's happening more and more, unfortunately. The witch hazel, which I love, and blooms at a time when almost nothing else is blooming. Hearts of Buston. Anybody familiar with that plant? It has the weirdest seed capsule. It's like a pink, nubby, kind of almost like an eraser texture, and then it has reddish orange berries. I think it's an amazing plant. It's also called strawberry bush, which you can kind of see. It kind of looks like a strawberry. It's also called deer candy. So you might want to put it somewhere that's a little more protected. Rough goldenrod, this is a cultivar called Fireworks. It's gorgeous in the garden. It's really a lovely addition to home landscape. The silky camellia, I saw this on a hike in Haywood Landing. They're difficult to find at a nursery. I was able to finally get one, but I think they're absolutely gorgeous. The habit and the size of the tree is sort of like a dogwood, but you get these beautiful flowers in the spring. Narrowleaf sundrops is one of the earliest flowers to bloom in my yard, and it doesn't really capture it in the picture, but it is the purest yellow and a very cheerful plant. Our penstemon species, we have a few that are native. Here's the red ring milkweed again. The coastal plain serviceberry, a nice substitute for your crepe myrtles. Coral honeysuckle, which is just a magnet for our hummingbirds. Joe pieweed, love it. It's got a big pink head of flowers. Sweet goldenrod, I love the foliage has like a really faint licorice scent. It's very lovely. And despite its common name, again misleading, New York ironweed is indeed native here. That's the purple flower. Two more of our native milkweeds. Aren't they gorgeous? They really are beautiful. All right. The next benefit is our native plants provide us with a sense of place. When you travel and you visit different cities and you see the same stores, there's a Starbucks, a McDonald's, whatever. You could be in any town, anywhere, because it all looks the same. And unfortunately, our landscaping has become that as well, because we see used over and over again the same non-native plants everywhere. And so you could be in any town, any part of town. Crepe myrtles, hello, they're everywhere. But it really sort of strips away the personality of the place and the uniqueness and the character. So, that's what native plants provide to us. I was going to say, this is another little quiz. Does anybody have an idea where these pictures might have been taken? You can raise your hand if you know. Alice? The Croatan, yes. So we have the longleaf pines. Who knows what the middle plant is? Venus flytrap. Who knows what the plant on the right is? Pitcher plant. That's right. So my goodness, I mean, these things are unique, especially the longleaf pine and the Venus flytrap are very unique to our area, and let us know where we are. They really define the place. So we have all of these amazing native plants that belong here and offer a sense of place. I want to share with you, I recently found this article from the October 2022 Southern Living magazine. It's probably going to make me mad. Okay. So here is the South's most iconic plants, 12 of our favorite classic Southern plants. Okay. So camellias, crepe myrtles, tulips, Japanese maples, chrysanthemums, daffodils, French hydrangeas are not only not from the South, they're not from North America. Okay? They mention the native azalea, the deciduous azalea, but they focus on the non-native evergreen azaleas, which are not from this continent. They mention the cherry genus, but they show a picture of the Japanese cherry tree. They mention a southern magnolia, which is one of the most gorgeous plants, but they have a picture of a tulip magnolia. The bottom two plants are the only two which are indigenous to the Southeast. We have been sold a bill of goods. I find it fascinating, and nobody knows this. Those plants have become so common and used so much that that's what people think is our southern plants. Isn't that amazing? So I want to write to them, but I haven't yet. Let's talk about some more benefits. All right, this is the lovely spotted bee balm, or Monarda punctata. It was one of the most popular plants in my yard this year for bees. Native plants, you're going to choose native plants that are happy with the conditions that you have. You do not need to fertilize them. Now, when I start a bed, I basically live on a sand dune, an inner sand dune. I do put a top dressing of about 2 inches of compost, but I try not to disturb the soil too much. And what we find is a lot of our native plants prefer lean soil. And if you fertilize or over-enrich your soil, they're actually not happy and they won't do as well. They'll flop, there'll be problems. Once native plants are established, they should be able to get by with whatever the typical rainfall is for the area. You should not have to do a lot of watering, so you don't have to run your irrigation system. I do recommend, though, that you do supplemental watering the first year, just like any plant, until it's established. So if you don't have rain every week, you probably want to water. A lot of our native plants have deep root systems, which is important for protecting water quality, controlling stormwater runoff, and preventing soil erosion. Native plants can eliminate the need for pesticides because native insects and native plants co-evolved. You're going to see evidence of insects on your plants, but your plants are going to survive, okay? And most importantly, our native plants are vital for insect survival. Without native plants, we won't have insects. They're especially important for what we call specialist insects. Yeah. That is the native passion flower. Isn't it amazing? It looks like something that came from another world. It's absolutely gorgeous. All right. So I mentioned specialist insects. What the heck are they? 90% of plant-feeding insects, which are mostly caterpillars, are specialists. And what that means, if we think about plants, they don't want to be eaten. And so plants will have defenses, chemical deterrents or physical deterrents that keep their predators at bay. So over thousands of years of coexistence, insects have adapted to overcome those defenses. And they benefit. If you think about the monarch, the caterpillar eats the milkweed, which has toxins, and then the butterfly, the caterpillar and the butterfly then carry those toxins and they're unpalatable to their predators. So they benefit from that. But the bad news is that when those plants are not available for these insect specialists, they don't have anything to eat. They can't easily switch to another type of plant. So remember, that's important that 90% of our plant-eating insects are specialists. Let's look at a few that you'll recognize. Here's the monarch again. The top is the female, the bottom's the male. Now, monarchs will nectar on all kinds of plants. They don't care if they're non-native or non-native invasives. They're happy to nectar on lots of different plants. But when it's time for the female to lay her eggs, she has to find the native milkweed plant. So you can have a yard full of beautiful flowers and a million monarchs, but if you don't have host plants, you're basically feeding the adults and starving the babies. There's nowhere for her to lay her eggs and nothing for the baby butterflies to eat. This is one of my favorite butterflies, the zebra swallowtail. If you want zebra swallowtails, you have to have pawpaw trees. That's the only leaves that their caterpillars can eat. Isn't that fascinating? Gulf fritillaries, we have quite a few of those here. And we just saw the picture of the native passion flower vine. This is another picture of it. Again, the adults will nectar on lots of different plants, but when it's time to lay eggs, they have to find a native passion flower vine. And the ones you see for sale at most plant nurseries and big box stores are not from the continent. They're usually from South America. There's only two natives, this one, and then there's a yellow. It's called Passiflora lutea, which has smaller leaves and a smaller, less showy flower. But the caterpillars have to have those plants. And we don't have those plants, we don't have those butterflies. And think about it, 90% of our insects that eat plants, they're specialists, so they have to have their host plants. So that's interesting. But why should I care about insects? Growing up, I'm sure I'm not alone. I was taught insects are yucky and ooh, and the first instinct is to step on it or kill it. And we have got to change our way of thinking about insects. Less than 1% are considered pests, and the vast majority of insects are beneficial and provide eco-services that we literally cannot live without. In fact, E.O. Wilson referred to them as the little things that run the world. So we're going to talk about that. They provide essential services. This is a list of some of the services they provide. We're going to spend more time talking about the first two, but in addition to pollination and their importance in the food web, they're also very important for dispersing seeds, for breaking down and cleaning up decomposing matter. Can you imagine what the world would look like if we had a lot of dead and rotten things lying around that didn't get taken care of by our insects? They cycle nutrients, they maintain soil structure and fertility, and they provide biological pest control. So let's talk at first about this service of pollination. I think most people are pretty familiar with what pollination is. But what role do insects play? They're very, very vital for pollinating thousands and thousands and thousands of plants. In fact, 85% of the world's flowering plants are pollinated by insects, and more than 2/3 of the world's crops. And then they're also responsible for pollinating many of the plants that we need for stabilizing soil, cleaning air, and supplying oxygen. So when you think about pollination, what insect pops in your mind? Bees. Is there a particular bee that you think about when you think about pollinators? Honeybee. Okay, we're going to talk about honeybees. All right, honeybees are not native to North America. Does that blow your mind? It blew my mind when I learned it. Okay, there's 8 species of honeybee in the world, and the one we know best is the Western or European honeybee. It's not native to this continent. You can see there where it is native to. It was brought here in they were brought here in the 1600s by European settlers because of the wax and the honey that they produced. Indigenous peoples, I read, called them white man flies because when they saw honeybees, they knew that there were white people in the area, which makes sense. They were certainly pollinators when they arrived, but they really didn't get started the service of pollination in terms of our heavy reliance on them didn't really start until the advent of commercial agriculture. And then they were easy to pack up. The hives were easy to pack up and truck different places to pollinate lots of different types of crops. And now we are very, very dependent. I mean, commercial agriculture is dependent on honeybees. Lots and lots of money depends on honeybees providing pollination services for us. But when we look at, are they endangered? No. There are more honeybees in the world now than there have ever been. Have there been problems? Yes. Remember back in the 2000s and there was colony collapse disorder and the Save the Bee program started and everyone was very, very concerned. And I had friends and lots of well-intentioned people who felt like they were doing their part if they had a backyard beehive in helping the bees and also helping the environment. And that understanding has persisted, and it's really not true, the environmental aid part. This is a quote by someone who works with the National Wildlife Federation. If you like honey, that's fine, have your hive. But if you want to help the environment and the ecosystem, there are other ways that are better than being a backyard hive keeper, if that's the reason you're doing it. Does that shock anybody? Yeah. Okay, me too. When I learned it, I was like, what? Yeah. So we do have other bees, though, and these are my favorite, that are important pollinators and are a vital part of our ecosystem, and they desperately need our help. Look at these beauties. Native bees are an incredibly diverse, beneficial, and beautiful group of insects, and they range in size from about the tiny head of a pin, up to about the size of a cotton ball for our bumblebees. Let's learn about them. Globally, there's about 20,000 species of bee. There's 3,600 native species in North America and about 500 in North Carolina. Unlike our honeybees, which are social and live in hives, 90% of our native bees are solitary. They don't live with other bees. Most do not have queens or produce honey. And without the hive's larvae and food supplies to defend, native bees almost never sting. 70% nest in the ground and 30% in wood or hollow plant stems. And remember, we talked about the plant feeding insects that are specialists. Well, 25 to 30% of our native bees are pollen specialists, and that means they rely on one native plant or one family of native plants, and that's the only pollen that they'll collect for their larvae. Some of them rely on one plant. There's a passiflora bee, a passion flower bee, and it relies solely on the yellow passion flower that I mentioned. And what's amazing to me and miraculous to me is that these pollen specialist emergence, at whatever time of year they come out, early spring or early summer, it's timed to mesh with the blooming of the plant. that they get their pollen from. So it's a very intricate, well-timed dance. And that's fascinating to me. They're very efficient pollinators, especially of fruits, vegetables that are native to North America. Unfortunately, the bottom statistic is pretty alarming to me. Nearly 1 in 4 is imperiled and at increasing risk of extinction. This here is a green metallic bee. It's pretty small. This is on thistle. So you see all the white? This is white pollen the thistle produces. So focusing on native bees is the way to help the ecosystem, help the environment, and they desperately need our help. All right, we're going to move on to another function of insects. Maybe. Their role in the food web. And I know this looks like junior high. I probably got it from a junior high science website. You're probably familiar with food webs. Insects are vital to food webs. A lot of animals rely solely on insects as their only food. But insects are very important for getting the energy that comes to the plants from the sun, and then the plant-eating insects then can transfer the energy through the rest of the food web. And of all the insects, the insect that does the best job of transmitting that energy is our caterpillars. Okay? If I was him, I wouldn't be all that excited about that. He's going to get eaten. But they do the best job of taking the energy that comes from the sun to the plants. And again, our caterpillars need native plants. And then when other creatures eat the caterpillars, that energy moves through the web. And guess what? Birds know it. 96% of our terrestrial birds feed insects to their young. Okay, even birds who later as adults may become primarily seed or berry eating, when they're feeding their young, they want insects for their young. And guess what type of insects they prefer? Caterpillars. Okay, mostly caterpillars. I've read that caterpillars, they're high in fat. They have more protein than beef. They're nice and soft and squishy. Have you ever watched parent birds feed their babies? They just stuff it down there. So if you've got a beetle with sharp edges and sharp legs, that's going to be tough on the baby. But you've got a nice, soft, squishy, it's kind of like a little sausage, that's easily digestible. That's what they prefer. So 96% of birds rely on caterpillars primarily to feed their babies, okay? I want to talk a little bit more about the link between native plants, caterpillars, and birds. Okay. One of my favorite people on the earth, Dr. Doug Tallamy, is an entomologist and wildlife ecologist with the University of Delaware. And in 2013, he and his colleagues did a research study. Most people just call it the chickadee study. And they wanted to investigate how a bird's population was affected by plant selection in home landscapes. The study lasted 3 years and was published in 2018. They focused on breeding chickadees. They set up nesting boxes and cameras in over 160 yards. The yards had varying amounts of native and non-native vegetation. They took videos and then analyzed the footage. And it resulted in some really, really interesting findings. Oh, shoot. Well, there we go. Okay. These are some of the findings. The breeding parents foraged on native plants 86% of the time. They stayed close to the nest. They hunted only within a 160-foot radius. That surprised me. So they needed food close by. This right here blew my mind. From the time the babies hatched until they fledged, the parents brought 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars. Now, there were some spiders, but mostly caterpillars, to raise one brood. Think about that. Now, not all of them are like big, fat tobacco worms. You know, some of the caterpillars are small. But 6,000 to 9,000, these are little tiny birds. okay? And then after they fledge, the parents continue to feed them for 21 days, okay? So that's one pair of breeding chickadees, one clutch. Think about how many birds we want to see in our yards and how many caterpillars they may need, okay? I want all of them. I want cardinals and bluebirds and Carolina wrens. I want all of them. So just think about how many caterpillars those breeding birds will need. Then the scientists went further and asked what percentage of native plants are needed to support the caterpillars that are necessary to provide adequate food for breeding chickadees. And what they discovered is that if there were 70% native plants available, this allowed the chickadee population to be stable. And that means that there were enough young chickadees coming up to replace the older chickadees that died of old age or predation. If they wanted the population to grow, they needed access to more than 70% native plants. And unfortunately, when the amount of non-native plants increased in a yard, the birds were significantly less to occupy and breed. And those that did, the health of the chicks were compromised, and some of them didn't make it. In fact, it was very sad that when they were inspecting the nest afterwards, they would find some nests in yards where there weren't enough native plants, and they would find the babies dead, and they would find seeds in the nest. And so the parents were trying to bring to the babies something to eat, but it was not anything they could eat, and they starved. So yeah, that's pretty sad. So how can we support a greater number and variety of birds on our properties? I bet y'all can figure it out. It's clear that birds need caterpillars to raise their young, and if we want more birds, we need more caterpillars. I like to think about people becoming caterpillar ranchers. Let's raise as many caterpillars as we can. If we want more birds, we need more caterpillars. And if we want more caterpillars, we need more native host plants. Remember, most caterpillars are specialists, and they need one native plant or one family of native plants. So now we've talked about why caterpillars, bees, and other insects are important, but why do we need to support them? I'm going to let y'all read this because it's too depressing. Bottom line is insects are not doing well globally, and they're declining at a faster rate than all other animals, and they're in pretty dire straits. So that's why we need to support them. And statistics are important, but sometimes personal experience means a lot more. When I was growing up, I remember anytime we stopped at a gas station, my dad was out there scrubbing the windshield because it always had bug guts on it. I don't know about you all. I don't have to wash my windshield that much. And while short term, it's great to have a clean windshield, you remember all those essential services provided by insects. You know, if we lose them, the ecosystems will collapse. If they go, we go. Okay. But I don't know. Is that something y'all have experienced? Yeah. So why are insects in such trouble? Okay, here's the problems. Habitat loss and fragmentation. I always think of habitat loss. I think of the Amazon burning, or, certainly in this picture you have this huge, neighborhood development with some green space left, but not very much. But habitat fragmentation and loss is also when we clear a lot to build a house and we put palm trees and crepe myrtles and loropetalum back on the property. Pesticide exposure, the impact of invasive species, and changes in climate. These are all the reasons that our insects are in trouble. What can we do? Here's the takeaway. We can help insects build biodiversity and support ecosystems simply by making different landscaping choices. It's not painful. It's a lot of fun. We're going to talk about that. Each of us can do something, even if it's small. So finally, here we are. We're going to talk about the steps that I promised you in the beginning. I think importantly, starting with taking an inventory of what you have in your yard is important. There are plant identification apps. picture of this is about, I can't remember if it's $30 or $50 a year. iNaturalist is free. You also, if you have a smartphone, there's usually a feature with the camera that's a look up plant feature. And when you're doing identification, I recommend really being sure that you know what you're looking at. You can Google the plant name and native range, and then there's some websites that can help you figure it out as well. But why it's important, I'll give you an answer. The plant to the right is the partridge berry. It's a sweet, sweet little ground cover that's covered in white flowers in the spring, and then it has red berries in the fall. And I did all this research about my site conditions, and I said, oh, this plant, this is what I need, so I'm going to buy a whole bunch of them at $8 or $10 a pop. Well, thank goodness I did an inventory of my property because I had a whole bunch of it. So save yourself some money and find out what you have. It's also good to identify what non-natives do you have and what non-native invasives do you have. Because the next thing you want to do is try to get rid of your non-native invasives. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's I probably will go to my grave fighting English ivy. I don't know. But what's lovely about removing them is you're benefiting the ecosystem. And sometimes when you just get rid of these invasive plants, you'll find that there are some lovely natives waiting in the seed bank to come up. So yeah, that's the hard part. It's a kind of a never-ending job, but you'll be rewarded for it. This is my favorite one. Do nothing. Just allow an area of your property to stay natural. It's not going to hurt anything. Get any invasives that are out of there, or let part of your property go back to its natural state. This is the area between my house and the neighbor's house, and I love it, and it provides a lot of privacy. The most important thing we're going to talk about, adding native plants. We have thousands of native plants. How do you know which ones? Not all native plants are the same. There are some native species which are especially supportive of wildlife. So this is the Roman arch, and you may have learned about the keystone. If you remove the keystone, the whole arch falls. You can have a lot of native plants, but if you don't have some keystone plants, your ecosystem is still in trouble. Okay, Carol, how do we know which ones are keystone plants? Doug Tallamy, one of my favorite people on the earth, has done the work for us. And he worked with the National Wildlife Federation and came up with this native plant finder tool. So you go to this website, you enter your zip code, and up comes a list of keystone trees, shrubs, and flowers. And they're ranked by the number of moth and butterfly species they support. Okay? So I did it for your area. Here to the left, there's your native native cherries, your native oaks, your native willows, and I added river birch because it was such a high number. But look at how many caterpillars they support. Isn't that phenomenal? So if you have in your yard a place for a large tree, and you're thinking, I'm thinking about an oak or a ginkgo. Okay, well, I want to do the right thing for the habitat. The oak provides support for this many species. Who knows how many species the ginkgo supports? 0. Isn't that remarkable? Yes, they're from China. It used to be my favorite tree. And they are beautiful. And you know what? If you love a ginkgo, you should have it. But just be mindful of what you're doing overall in your yard. We talked about 70% native plants can help support the ecosystem. Shoot for that. But if you love your gardenias, if you love your azaleas, I have them. They're healthy. I'm going to keep them. But if ever they falter or fail, they'll be out and I'll have a native plant in its place. But anyway, this is a fantastic website. And what's also really cool, you can look up specific butterflies and find out what you can plant in your yard to attract them. So this pretty thing is the olive hairstreak butterfly. And there's only one plant in our area that can be its host, and that's the eastern red cedar. And the good news is that tree is also host to 28 other species of moths and butterflies. So just like the zebra swallowtail, hey, I really want that. I'm going to plant a pawpaw tree, plant it and they will come. So just because a plant is native and it's native to your region, you still need to think about your yard or your property. Light conditions, soil conditions, drainage, and so forth. How much room do you have? This is that beautiful passion flower. I love them, but I don't have it because they're pretty aggressive and they take up a lot of room. So think about that when you're planting your garden. We have, I don't know, 100 different species of goldenrod. Some of them are very aggressive, some of them are not. So just make sure that you are, in addition to choosing a native plant, making sure it's right plant, right place. Visit natural areas near your property. If you have a state park or a natural area, visit. This will tell you a lot. Like if it's close to your home and it has similar conditions, you'll find what are the plant communities that are doing well together. This is the side of my yard. I didn't plant any of these, but they clearly are very happy together. That's a good way to know what will work in your yard. This book I love. If you find a native plant in your yard that's doing really well, let's say an American holly, you can look it up in this book, and under each plant there's a section called companion plantings, and it will tell you the plants that thrive or that are natural partners or plant communities with that plant. So we'll likely do well with it. Start small. This is my house. As I told you, I have crepe myrtles, I have loropetalum, I have Confederate jasmine. But when I was first starting, this is what I did. I put in lance leaf coreopsis. This is also my yard. This was a steep slope that was difficult to mow, so we put in a mass planting of muhly grass. I'm now not into mass plantings as much. I don't think monocultures are great, but it really is beautiful. This is the fall. This is the winter. Look at this. Isn't that amazing? I think this was a morning shot, and this was frost in the winter. This is another native grass, purple love grass, and then these are dead stems of a swamp sunflower. I still think they're beautiful. And then in the back we have a red cedar. I just think that's gorgeous. And brown is the color. So let's talk about the American lawn. Y'all know we got to talk about the lawn. Here's some statistics for you. The June 2021 article in the Washington Post said that 45 to 50 million acres in the continental U.S. are currently American lawn. I'm sure it's more than that now. That's nearly as much as all of the country's national parks combined. According to the EPA, we use up to 3 trillion gallons of water per year and 59 million pounds of pesticides per year, which can seep into our land and waterways. Per the Department of Transportation, in 2018, Americans used nearly 3 billion gallons of gasoline running lawn and garden equipment. That's the equivalent of 6 million passenger cars running for a year. And most importantly, turf grass is not native and does not contribute to the ecosystem in any meaningful way. So am I telling you to totally get rid of it? Believe it or not, I'm not. But we can reduce it. And it doesn't have to be the default landscape. It's great if you need an area for your pets or your children. You need pathways. But I think it's a good idea, as Doug Tallamy says, to treat it like an area rug and not wall-to-wall carpet. That makes sense to me. And you can do that by enlarging current beds, which I think is beautiful here. Areas that you're not using as lawn. This is a hill strip between a sidewalk and the street. Great place to put in some native plants. This is gorgeous. This lady decided, I'm getting rid of all my lawn. And look what she has. This is native pollinator garden. Also, landscaping in layers. We try to mimic what nature offers because that supports the most biodiversity. So this is a lovely yard. I think this is in Virginia. Canopy layer, understory, shrubs, herbaceous plants, and nice ground layer. Especially important for insects are soft landings under trees. They, almost all of our insects complete part of their life up in the tree, and then they drop down and either burrow into the soil, into the leaves, into the underlying vegetation. If you have hard-packed grass that gets mowed right up to the base of the tree, or hard-packed mulch, or concrete or stone, the animals are not able to complete their life cycle. Offer blooms of different shapes, sizes, and colors, and try to have a succession of blooms as much of the year as possible. Our insects are show preferences to different shapes, colors, sizes, even orientations. Some insects like plants, flowers that hang down, some that show up. So trying to have a variety. But remember, it's so easy to get caught up in flowers, but we need to remember about host plants, okay? And luckily, some of these are also host plants. But plant in groups instead of singletons. You know, you don't want one, one of each. Let's plant in groups. That makes it an easier target for our pollinators to find. Eliminate pesticide use. Given the chance, nature will come into balance. Yeah, it's hard. But I had aphids one year, and I waited, and I was so sad. I was like, what am I going to do? I decided just to wait. And after about 4 or 5 days, I had ladybugs show up, and there was ladybug larvae, and they started taking care of my aphids. This was taken at my house. This is native bees in a blanket flower. I thought they were dead. I said, oh no. So I flicked the flower and they flew off, and then they came back. And I said, well, I got to research that. Okay. So these are all males. In the native bee world, the females do all the work. They prepare the nest. They collect the pollen. They make what's called bee bread. It's a combination of nectar and pollen. And they lay the egg with the pollen bread. But the males pretty much eat, fly around, wait for a lady. So at night they don't have a hive or anywhere to go. So they do what's called aggregate sleeping. I call it boy bee slumber party. And I so much wish that I could zoom in, because this little guy's face is just covered with pollen. And it just looks like they have had a big time and they're just all passed out. So I say all that to say, when we have problems with mosquitoes, our town sprays for mosquitoes at night. And I know that they do that in part to try to not harm pollinators that are out during the day. But these guys are out at night, and so are all our moths and other insects that pollinate plants at night. So in my town, I'm on the no spray list. I don't know how effective that's going to be because everybody else is getting sprayed around me. But I don't want to invite these sweet ones to my yard and then lose them. So something to think about. What about mosquitoes, Carol? This information is from Doug Tallamy, who's an entomologist. He said in order for those spray companies that you pay to come to your house to be effective, they'd have to kill at least 90% of the adults, and they typically can kill 10 to 50%. So they have to keep coming back, and you have to keep paying them. Collateral damage is our beneficial insects. It's much better to target the larval stage. I'm sure you all know about clearing any breeding spots or standing water using your BT dunks. And he recommends having mosquito traps. You make basically in a bucket an area that's just so attractive to the lady mosquitoes. They come and they lay their eggs there, but you put a BT dunk in there. And they're also called buckets of doom, which is my preferred name for them. And you'll also find if you're not using pesticides, you're going to see more animals that are going to feed on the mosquitoes. So those are all good things. 70% of our bees nest in the ground. Leave some bare spots. I used to think these were ant hills in the spring, but this is a bee nest, and this is one coming out, and there she is in a stem. So leave patches of bare soil, leave your stems standing so that they have someplace to nest. Leave the leaves. If you need to move the leaves, rake them gently. Try not to use your leaf blower because that destroys the life that's in the leaves. But so many of our critters will complete part of their life cycle in the leaves. And then that also includes like frogs and turtles and all kinds of things. So decrease use of outdoor lights. In my neighborhood, everybody loves to light up their entire yard and show off their landscaping. But night lights are terrible for insects. Who can tell me what moth this is? Isn't this the most beautiful moth? When was the last time you saw one? Yeah. Okay. So they are gorgeous. They have, as adults, a very short time, 7-ish days. They don't have mouths. They don't have a GI tract. Okay. Their main purpose as adults is to find a mate, take care of business, lay eggs. So if you have your night lights on and moths like this spend their time bashing themselves against the light all night, potentially exhausting themselves to death or being so tired that they're easy prey for birds or bats. This Luna moth is not looking for her mate. I don't know if that's a male or a female. I should know, but. So what we can do is use motion activated lights. And if you have to have a light on, use an LED light that's filtered to yellow and amber. And please, 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 please don't use bug zappers. But yeah, I haven't seen one in a long, long, long time, and they're gorgeous. Water source is good. We're wrapping up. Water source is good. Doesn't have to be fancy. If you have place on your yard, like at the back, to have a brush pile, that's a great habitat for birds and insects and other critters. Continue learning. Read a good book. The one in the middle is the one we're going to give away here in a minute. That's Doug Tallamy's second book. His first book is excellent. This is also a book that's a great resource, and I have these if y'all want to look through them. These are also resources, and don't worry about trying to remember them. I'll send an email to Michael, and it will have links to all these so you can just explore on your own. We'd love to have you join our chapter of the North Carolina Native Plant Society. We have native seed swaps in November. A lot of us do winter sowing, and then we have a lot of baby plants in the spring, and we have a plant swap. We do plant identification hikes, community outreach. And most importantly, just spread the word. If there's something that's stuck in your mind tonight, talk about it with your friends. And look at these. This was in my yard. Isn't she beautiful? Look at that. It's a wasp. Bee. These are, well, that one's not from my yard, but they're just all amazing. Look at this little tiny toad. That's actually from a friend's yard. So in closing, I want to read one passage from Doug Tallamy's first book, and then we'll do the drawing for the book, okay? And I'll try to answer any questions if you have them. For the past century, we have created our gardens with one thing in mind: aesthetics. We have selected plants for landscaping based only on their beauty and their fit within our artistic designs. Yet, if we designed our buildings the way we design our gardens with only aesthetics in mind, they would fall down. Just as buildings need support structures, our gardens need native plants to support a diverse and balanced food web essential to all sustainable ecosystems. To me, the choice is clear. The costs of increasing the percentage and biomass of natives in our suburban landscapes are small, and the benefits are immense. Increasing the percentage of natives in suburbia is a grassroots solution to the extinction crisis. To succeed, we do not need to invoke governmental action. We do not need to purchase large tracts of pristine habitat that no longer exist. We do not need to limit ourselves to sending money to national and international conservation organizations and hoping it will be used productively. Our success is up to each one of us individually. We can each make a measurable difference almost immediately by planting a native nearby. As gardeners and stewards of our land, we have never been so empowered, and the ecological stakes have never been so high. And that's it.
Thank you.
So I'm happy to take any questions, and if somebody wants to bring the bag of names over, we'll also do the drawing. Yeah.
Will you wait until I bring the microphone so that everybody can hear you? Thank you.
I'm wondering about, you said something about composting in your yard, and I'm new to this area, and I came with composting history of throwing the food waste directly into the garden. I don't go through steps. I just throw it in there, and then in the spring, I turn it over with a shovel. So I wondered if now I shouldn't do that here because I'm making the ground too rich for my...
I think that's fine. I think composting is wonderful. It probably would take you some time to get to the point that if your yard is anything like mine, it's very lean. I usually add compost because I want it to retain maybe a little bit more water and not just be, drained so quickly. You can gardening is an experiment, and do what you're doing and just see how it goes. You're certainly not going to hurt anything. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I was curious about what you were speaking about the spray and and being on a no spray list. Can you say a little bit more
Sure.
about that?
I live in Emerald Isle, and I can't imagine that we're way ahead of everybody else in terms of having a no spray list. So if you contacted the town that you live in and ask, is there a no spray list? And I just gave them my name and my address. And then you hopefully trust they're supposed to turn it off when they're at your house. Yes. So we'll see. They exist. I assume they exist in most towns. And it's one small step, at least to let them know I don't want that.
We see a lot of people that are hiring
Yes.
mosquito killers. I mean,
Yes.
and I kind of wonder when it's right next door to somebody
Yes.
else's house, whether or not that fog is also
Yes.
affecting.
Well, there are a lot of
houses.
rules about how pesticides are supposed to be used. You're not supposed to use it if there's wind. You're not supposed to use it at certain times of day. I'm not sure that all the rules and regs are followed. It would greatly concern me that there would be pesticide drift. Yeah.
Two things, but they kind of tie together. Two things, they kind of tie together, though. One is that I heard there's legislation that was recently passed regarding planting native plants on public property. And then the other thing is that if we went around planting American chestnuts and elms and you get the picture, and more recently Persea, the bay, and the sassafras that you talked about, we're gonna have a problem because these plants no longer can live in our environment.
Right.
So with those two things, can you speak to that,
Sure,
please?
happy to. There was legislation that was going to require more government agencies to follow the guidelines of having native plants on the properties that they were responsible for. But it ended up being the Department of Health and Natural Resources. So anything that they are engaged in, they're now pushing to plant natives. It's wonderful. Your question about the plants that have diseases and are problems, it breaks my heart because we have a lot of red bays. And are you all familiar with laurel wilt? All of our red bays are dying, and it's because of a beetle that came from Asia. They think it was probably introduced in like 2000, I don't know if it was 2002 or 2012 in Georgia. And the ambrosia beetle carries this fungus called laurel wilt, and there's nothing you can do about it. So a lot of the red bay forest, maritime forest, have been decimated. I'd say it's only been like within the past couple years that we've seen evidence of it where I live. But once you start seeing the ends of the branches brown, your tree is a goner. So it makes me very sad because it's one of the primary hosts for the Palamedes swallowtail, which is a beautiful butterfly. The good news is that they usually can get to the age where the plant can reproduce, and the fungus doesn't seem to attack them until they're a certain age. So we have young seedlings, but they don't grow up, to big healthy trees. So I think your point is very well taken. Unfortunately, the plants that you mentioned are all plants that have problems because pests that were introduced from other places came here and our native plants didn't have a defense against them. So no, I would not recommend planting red bays. Sassafras so far in my yard has not been affected, though it is in the family of plants that could be affected, as are avocados, which is interesting. So your point is very well taken. You do not want to plant native plants that are being decimated because you're just going to end up with a problem. So, any other questions? Okay.
I saw a little brochure back here that talked about landscaping design. Is that like a service?
The Coastal Landscapes Initiative has produced lots and lots of materials. They have a website, and then I also brought some literature that is available for free. So the Plant This Instead document is intended for homeowners and landscapers, and we're trying to get them to move away from the non-native invasive plants that are commonly used in landscaping to native alternatives that will hopefully meet the same need in the landscape. There's also a brochure that has free landscape templates. So you know you want to use native plants, but you don't know how to really put them together in a way that's going to look attractive. Those are free. So there's also additional resources on the website. And we really have not only a lack in native plant nurseries, there's one in Kinston, and that's the only one in our area. But we also have a very sad lack of landscape designers, landscape architects, gardeners who understand native plants and how to use them in the landscape. So what I've tried to do is educate myself and learn as much as I can. And we did help out. Are y'all familiar with the Inlet Inn up in Beaufort? It's right on the water. The owner was very enthusiastic about native plants and wanted to redo the little corner there at the water, and there was no one. So I did the design. So if y'all don't like it, don't tell me. And then Karen Mulcahy, who owns the plant nursery in Kinston, helped source the plants, and then volunteers from our chapter helped plant. And I think it's gorgeous. And we're already seeing bees and some insects that weren't there before. But it's a very young garden. We just planted that in May. But there's really no one that I know who does it for a living. And I also think we really need businesses that identify and remove non-native invasive plants. I would pay somebody to help me. I mean, if you know anybody who's young and, strong and looking to make a living, a good living, I think that's a way that someone could find a niche. So, anything else? Last call.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's pull for the book.
Well, here we go.
The book is still over there, yeah.
Just want to thank everybody who was here and everybody who was online. And say again that if you like what we do, Carolina Nature Coalition, please donate so we can continue this, and we appreciate that. Most of the stuff later is going to be for people here. There are brochures in the back. There are also food still, so you can get some more food. And we are going to do a drawing for the book. So if you're online, unfortunately, you cannot get the book.
You're gonna be the,
Oh, no, I got it. My name.
oh yeah, his name is in there, but that's okay. This is the second of Doug Tallamy's books. This is the first. This is the one we're giving away. See if I can read it. Stephanie James.
Come on down.
Oh!
Thank you. I finally won something.
Nope, that's all I have.
That's it,
But
all
we
right.
do have a few other brochures. I think some people have already gotten them. I'm available for questions if anybody wants to mill around for a minute. I'll be packing up. But thank you. It's been delightful.
Make sure you signed up so that you can learn what we're doing in the future. We'll do more on things like this, but on many other topics.